Well, here we are with the coronavirus raging, and I wanted to continue to share many years of studying and teaching scripture in a Catholic seminary, which I've been out of for some years now. And I did go through the whole Gospel of Mark. It was kind of a labor of love, but also a bit, the Italians say pesante, sort of burdensome. But I hope some people enjoyed it. I have 21 subscribers on my YouTube channel. That's not a lot, but it's more than enough for me. And I do mostly Spanish programs for Radio Maria Peru on spiritual and biblical topics, but I haven't done one in English for some time now, since I did, I think, number 60 with the Gospel of Mark. So that I wanted to perhaps more leisurely or more at ease, even though I was at ease with Mark, but nevertheless, a new style perhaps or something. I know it's not going to shake up the earth or anything. But in any case, I wanted to begin speaking about the letter to the Hebrews, which I believe is the most profound writing in the New Testament, which means that for Christians, it's possibly the most profound writing in the whole Bible. And I wanted to spend this session, and I want to keep them to 15 or 20 minutes max, speaking about how I came to love this epistle to the Hebrews. And it'll probably take one or two sessions to cover that, and then dive into the text of the epistle. And so I'll be commenting it, not verse by verse, I don't think, like I did with Mark, but certainly taking a foothold from passages as divided up, for example, in my Jerusalem Bible in Spanish, which I use, and speaking about the topic of that section, pericope or paragraph, or maybe a few verses, and probably maybe skip over certain things or not. I'm going to play it by ear. I'm frank, I don't prepare much, except that I translated the Holy Epistle in 1992-93 in the Dominican Republic. I'll talk about that in a second. And then I took a course in the Pontifical Biblical Institute, the Biblicum in Rome, which is probably one of the greatest centers in the world for biblical studies. And I took the course from Father Albert Vanhoye, Vanhoye, who had been rector of the Biblicum. And on my arrival in Rome in 1996, I'm going to tell you the whole story, which I think it's a nice story. I took the course from him. I think he's the master on Hebrews. He was later made a cardinal, so you can Google him if you want. Vanhoye, Albert, Jesuit. And then when I was teaching in seminary for some 14 years, I taught the course on Hebrews as a seminar elective at least 3 times, I think, if not, 4. So I'm familiar with the letter. And then after that, of course, I've had occasion to sort of assimilate it over the years, etc. So that's by way of credentials, I guess, or something. But I wanted to tell you the interesting story because I want to, like I said, leisurely weave in spiritual experiences that I've had, discernment of the hand of God, His benefices, His favors to us. And so, when I was in the Dominican Republic, studying to try to be a discalced Carmelite priest for a dependency of the province of Castile, Spain, I seriously delved into the Bible. I asked for some books to be sent to me from Miami, the Greek New Testament, Nestle Aland, dictionaries, the New Jerome Biblical Commentary, which I went through cover to cover, which is also a way of reading the whole Bible in that light and making numerous notes, so that if I were to show you my New Jerome Biblical Commentary, even the blank pages at the end are filled with lists of words in Hebrew or meanings of names or other things. It's just it's a late, I was there in the Dominican Republic in the middle of nowhere near Santiago in a Carmelite convent. I had all day to myself. And for me, there were no Saturdays or Sundays or holidays that were any different from any other day. And one of the things I set out to do with a Greek grammar that I had, a book to learn Greek, I had already taken a course in Greek at Harvard Divinity School in 1980 or 84 maybe, with Ralph Lazzaro, I remember him. Had one semester, I was supposed to take the second semester, and instead there was a Gandhi talk by Diane Eck, famous Harvard woman, scholar of Hinduism and Banaras City of Lights and things like that, Eck. And I said, I have to learn about Gandhiji. So I abandoned my second semester of Greek. I had done well in the first. Then in the Dominican Republic by myself, I studied Greek, New Testament Greek, which is a lot easier than classical Greek. And I went through about half the whole New Testament, translating from Greek to Spanish, which I thought was more suitable for rendering the Greek. And one of the books that I translated the whole thing is Hebrews. So by that time, and it's supposed to be one of the more difficult Greeks in the New Testament. John is probably the easiest. Hebrews is probably the hardest. Sort of classical Alexandrian type Greek. And so jumping ahead to when I took the course with Vanhoye, just to my credentials again sort of thing, YouTube. When I had the oral final exam with Father Vanhoye, which is the normal practice in Rome, an oral exam, he said to me, and he was not a man, he was a very serious, dry man. He said to me, your Greek is good. And so I every day in the Dominican Republic for 15 months, and then in Spain I continued, I would take a page like the one you see here and write a line in Greek, blank line, another line in Greek, another blank line, 2 pages. So I had my work ready for the following day when I would fill in the blank lines with the translation. And then at the end of those 2 pages every day, I would then do another 2 pages, Greek blank line, Greek blank line. And that's how I really practiced my Greek. And then I also got into the Hebrew. When I got to Rome and I got accepted at the Gregorian University in 1996, the dean, Father Jared Wicks, a Jesuit, very famous Vatican II scholar. He's very old now. If he's still alive, he's a lovely man. Loves the Dominicans, which I had also been. He said to me, well, and when you get your languages, you can then take courses at the Biblicum. Well, when I came back to actually study in Rome, the very next day, getting off the plane, I went to the Gregorian and took the Greek exam. And what they actually had for the exam was Hebrews 9, which I had reviewed on the plane. I really didn't know what they were going to ask, but I figured that that Hebrews would be about as hard as it could get, and it was Hebrews 9. And lo and behold, I passed that exam. He was very happy. The secretary said he was happy. A month later, I took the Hebrew exam. And I walked out of there quickly, and they told me, you passed. So now the dean looks at this former lawyer coming from Miami after a stint in the Dominican Republic and Spain with the Carmelites. And I was a lay person in Rome, and he's banged out Greek and Hebrew right from the get-go. So I was then able to enroll in the Biblicum, and the first course that I took there was Albert Vanhoye's The Epistle to the Hebrews in Italian. He's French, so his Italian was slow and clear, and I really understood my classes from the beginning quite well, having studied very little Italian. But I had been told in Spain, do not study Italian, you won't need to if you know Spanish well. So I took that literally, and I didn't study it, and it took me years to perfect or improve the correctness of my Italian speaking. Writing is another story, very difficult. Even Cuban professors there that had been there for a long time, it's very hard to write Italian properly. But anyway, by way of sort of introduction, I wanted to say that. So let's get back to the Dominican Republic. I remember Holy Week. That would have been 1993. And I don't know whether they asked me or it was the setup or whatever to speak to these church groups, very simple people. And I chose things from the letter to the Hebrews, especially because some of the readings, I think, in Holy Week are from, like, for example, Hebrews 5. Christ learned obedience through what he suffered. So I was very much into all that. But I remember back in Mexico in 1975 or so, I had a lot of time to study. I studied beyond what the university required in philosophy and theology, which was combined at the time for us. And the letter to the Hebrews was the one that really impressed me as, first of all, delightful experience of God's revelation. I said to myself, I'm so lucky to be studying this, and I feel that I am in contact with the very revelation of God. And so even back then, the letter to the Hebrews. Now, in the Dominican Republic and then in Spain, as I was translating, especially from the Hebrew, like, for example, Numbers and things like that, which normally are boring as heck, when you look at it word by word, you're in awe of it. You say to yourself, every single detail here of every placement of the tribes or the sanctuary or whatever, every word is gold. So that closeness to the scripture is incredibly important. And so what I will be showing, God willing, in these little talks will be this accordance Bible program. In Rome, I discovered Bible Works back in '96. I bought the 3.5 version. In the seminary, they upgraded to number 8, and it's my favorite, but it went out of business. I changed computers, couldn't get it back. I went into accordance. I don't like it as much for sure. But it does the job in some ways. Maybe, for example, this display of the English text, the Latin text, and I insist that the Latin is the most literal translation of the Greek and Hebrew, which is what makes the King James and the Reina Valera Spanish version of King James so literal. And I think that's the best way to translate. You can put footnotes explaining, but don't change the DNA of the text with your interpretation built into the translation. Because if you start doing that a lot, it's going to really water down or tergiversate, if that's a word in Spanish, it is twist the meaning of a lot of things. For example, if he's going to, well, even the Greek does things like that in the translation of the Hebrew, but I'm not going to get into that right now. To try to finish in 20 minutes, what I was going to say was, from the Dominican Republic, I was sent to Spain with the Carmelites and enrolled in the major seminary of Madrid, which was a nice, beautiful walk from our convent in Plaza de España, very centric place in Madrid. You went by the Palacio Real and all these things. And there, one of the courses I took, 1994, was the ordination course, priestly ordination at holy orders. I think it was called ordination. And the textbook was Old Priests, New Priest by Albert Vanhoye, in Spanish, Ediciones Sígueme. I still have it. And when I read that book, I said, this is the best book I've ever read, especially loving the Bible. By that time, I was well into Bible studies, and I said, this is the best book I've ever read, explaining the significance of Christ and his sacrifice in a way that made the most sense and was closest to the biblical texts, including Old Testament, Hebrew Bible, which I was very big on the holistic understanding of Scripture. None of this, I specialize in New Testament or I specialize in Old. I specialize in the Bible. I think it's unusual because even at the Biblicum, I took some 7, I think, Old Testament courses. I've studied the Old Testament about as much as the New, except the New, of course, is more familiar, which could be good or bad. But Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Isaiah, some of the other prophets, I have studied quite a bit. So anyway, I read this book in 1994, probably, second semester. And little did I imagine that 2 years later, I would be in Rome sitting at the feet of Albert Vanhoye, the guy who wrote this book, taking the course. I had not imagined that. I was in the Carmelites. They said to me, you have no vocation at the end there. Go back home. I went back home to Miami. I got reinstated as a lawyer. I had retired as a lawyer, that's the technical term. Started practicing law for about 2 years, saved money. And then a friend of mine came and precisely looking at these pages that I was talking about, said to me, this is your passion. Now this woman is like a muse that I have, an incredibly special woman who had lived in Rome, whom I had met in Rome in 1989. It's another long story. And when she looked at precisely these notebooks, and I have 5 of them, translating the Bible, especially the New Testament, she said to me, this is your passion. Why don't you go to Rome? And Rome was cheap. not like United States universities. Rome was fun, it was a dream. And the only problem I really had was finding housing. And that was a torturous, a torture to be successful in, but God provided. And so I had a great place to live. And for now, I think at 20 minutes, something I'm going to stop and we'll continue next time.